It's 11:30, so we'll get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here this morning. I'm Danielle Margarita from the Rhode Island Office of Library and Information Services. I'm excited to kick off our first session of the morning, Teen Volunteering as a Core Library Service. Today we have Alyssa Taft. She's the teen librarian at the Cranston Public Library here in Rhode Island and a former school library media specialist. She is a URI graduate, and her professional interests include youth civic engagement, collection development, and partnerships between schools and public libraries. An avid critical reader, she's a former member of the Rhode Island Middle School Book Award Committee, current member of the Rhode Island Teen Book Award Committee, and a reviewer for Publishers Weekly. Thanks so much for being here this morning, Alyssa, and I'll turn things over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Danielle. I just want to apologize. I'm getting over a sinus infection, so I sound a little congested. So I apologize if at any point I need to mute myself and go cough up a lung, but I think I'll be okay for the presentation. So just want to do a little shout out to my Rhode Island librarians. I see a couple of you, and welcome to everyone else. So let me just share my screen real quick. Alrighty, can everyone see my screen? Everyone, it looks good? All right, awesome. So this is Teen Volunteering as a Core Library Service. That's me. I'm Alyssa. I'm the teen librarian for Cranston Public Library in Cranston, Rhode Island. So this is our agenda for our hour. We are going to talk about my library as sort of like a case study for teen volunteering. We're going to talk about some common problems and maybe some solutions, best practices, teen volunteering through an EDI lens, and we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. At the very end, I am going to drop the link to the presentation in the chat because there are links embedded in here that you can explore in your own time, and it also includes my personal email if you have follow-up questions after the presentation. Okay, so at my library, I've been there about 5 years, and a big part of what I've done in the last 5 years is overhauling and expanding our teen volunteer program. We have 5 locations that we have teen volunteers at, and I coordinate for all of those locations. So when other libraries and other branch managers or youth services librarians in other locations other than my own need volunteers, it all goes through me. So there's actually teen volunteers that I maybe have never actually met in person because they volunteer at a branch that I just haven't run into them at, but everything comes through me as sort of a centralized person. Our volunteer program is for grades 6 to 12, and we're pretty strict about that. 5th graders, you're almost there. Sometimes anticipation can be good. And once you are in postgraduate, once you're done with high school, we've loved you as a teen volunteer, but you are no longer eligible to volunteer with us at the library. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but our main one is that we just have so many teen volunteers that we need to put some stipulations on that program. And finally, our program is year-round. However, we do have a huge push in the summer. We have a separate application. We have a giant volunteer orientation that we go through in May in preparation for the summertime. So like I said, it is year-round, but summer is definitely our busiest time. So in 2023, we had 235 teen volunteers. They have earned, over 2,000 hours. The year's not over yet, so it'll probably be pushed over a little bit. And we have 19 schools represented, which I think is pretty significant. I just want to pause on that because in Cranston, we have 4 middle schools and 2 high schools, which is pretty big for Rhode Island. A lot of towns have, 2 middle schools, 1 middle school. So I draw from 6 public schools, but clearly we also are drawing from a lot of private schools, charter schools. We have kids from other towns that actually come, border towns and other cities. And then, we have a pretty large homeschool population as well. So I feel pretty good about the large pool that we are drawing from. We have our teen volunteer application. So this is the first step if you want to volunteer with us. There's a link to it if you want to check it out. And it mostly is just gathering contact information. Excuse me. And then it asks a couple questions at the end, just asking kind of like why they're interested in volunteering, if they need volunteer hours for any specific reason, if they have any special skills that they want to share. And it's an application, but no one ever gets like rejected as long as, they're in grade 6 to 12. But I think the application is just a great way to make sure you have all the contact information in a centralized area. And then also, I think it adds a little bit of like weight and gravitas to you are applying to volunteer at the library. We are collecting this information for you, and we are asking you to at least initially reflect a little bit on why you might want to volunteer at the library. And if the answer is because you need hours for school, that's totally fine. You're still accepted into the program. So what do our volunteers do? Our volunteers are like essential for running our library. We could not do the volume of programming that we do without our volunteers. That's true year round, but that is especially true in the summer. There's just no way we could do everything we need to do for the summer without our team volunteers. So our team volunteers act as program assistants. They do program prep and displays. We work on community service projects. We have a teen review blog, and we actually have started bringing teen volunteers to outreach events. So the photograph here is actually from our summer reading kickoff event that we had last June, and the teen volunteers are all in the green shirts, and they basically ran the entire event. Like I just put people places and they executed it flawlessly. And we were able to put on this like huge, multi-city department cookout. We had a free book fair. We had lawn games. It was like an incredible event. And like truly, we just did not have enough people on staff to run that event successfully if we did not have like 20 team volunteers there that day. So when our teams act as program assistants, if you've had team volunteers in your library, you can probably guess what they do. They help set up. We usually have them check the kids in, pass out materials. We'll often have them model activities. So if they're going to be doing like story time, in the summer when they're not in school, we'll teach them the songs ahead of time and have them like do the motions. Sometimes we will have them, help kids if there's a kid that's struggling or needs a little bit of extra TLC. We also have them help clean up, answer questions. Kid dumps a glass of water on himself, needs to go to the bathroom. Just having extra people in the room is super helpful. And I do tell them there's times where they're just going to be kind of sitting in the back of the room, not doing anything, but just their presence, is incredibly helpful as we all know what it's like to be in a room with a ton of chaotic children. And then be like, oh, having an extra person there, it makes all the difference. So our teams also do program prep and displays. So as you can imagine, prepping crafts, that's a pretty typical team volunteer activity. Cutting things out of construction paper, counting out things, making templates. We also have them create models. That's a really helpful one. If we're doing any sort of activity where the kids are going to be making something, we have teen volunteers come in and make example crafts. And that's a great way to beta test them because some teens are super meticulous and are so good at crafts. And then some teams are very similar to a 5-year-old trying to do a craft. So then you see the holes in your process, make sure you have the right type of glue, all that jazz. We also have our teams make most of our youth services displays. So when I want to switch out my team display, I have a slapboard. I just make my list of titles. I have someone come in, I hand them the list, I hand them a sign for the display, and they pull all the books, they make it beautiful. And I do allow them, if you see anything else, or if there's a title that you feel fits the theme or you want to add, go for it. We also have a bulletin board that is just for the team volunteers. We used to just put flyers on it, but we have flyers at our desk. So you typically once a month, sometimes we go a little longer, at least once a season, we try to switch out the bulletin board. And I will make a loose plan for the bulletin board. I'll sort of gather all of the materials, and then I'll have a group come in and actually execute putting together the bulletin board. So our summer theme was make some noise. And they put that bulletin board together for us. We also do community service projects. So one of our big ones is cards for seniors. So we've done Holiday cards every year. The senior center in our town puts together like 300 Thanksgiving meals and 300 Christmas meals to deliver to seniors who are either homebound and or food insecure. And in all of those bags, there is a card from the teen volunteer team. So that's like a big push. We make, like 600 cards, every fall into winter to support those initiatives. And like the response we've gotten is incredible. I mean, who doesn't want a handmade card, but especially like, grandmas and grandpas love stuff like that. We also have done Bake for a Cause. So Help the Homeless RI is a Rhode Island initiative. And one of the things that they do is create bagged lunches to pass out to people experiencing homelessness. So we baked a bunch of treats, we packaged them up, we dropped them off with Help the Homeless RI, and they put them in the bag lunches that they were passing out that week. We also have done stuff like we stickered a bunch of books for Reach Out and Read, which is an organization in Rhode Island that gives out books at pediatricians' offices, but the organization wanted all the books stickered, and we were like, that's the perfect thing for the teen volunteers to do. So we do things through the library that might not necessarily directly benefit the library, and that is what we mean by like community service projects. And we also have a senior review blog. So this is an asynchronous virtual option that I sort of started during COVID, and I've continued with it. And I think this has been really great because at least in Cranston, not all of our locations, especially our largest central location that has the most going on, they're not in a walkable area. So my library that I primarily work out of, that my office is in, is not a walkable location. And so I talk to lots of teens who need hours or interested in contributing, but can't actually get to the library at the times where we need volunteers. And so this is a really great option. And I've linked the link to the blog, the Google form that we used for them to submit their reviews. And then I also wrote an article that was published in Computers and Libraries. So that goes into how I started the blog. So if this is something you're interested in, I'd probably do like a whole presentation just on the blog. But those links are there for you. And if you have questions, you can reach out to me. And really it's just they get community service hours in exchange for writing media reviews. We take reviews of all different types of media. And this has been a game changer for my collection development, really getting to see what are the types of things that they are reading, watching, listening to, and what are their thoughts? Oh my gosh, some of these are hysterical. Like even if you just go read some of the reviews on the blog, like so funny and very insightful. So this is another option that we have. And then finally, we bring them to outreach events. So this was something we started this summer, and the library went to one of our local farmers markets that is a collaboration between something called our Health Equity Zone, which is part of CCAP. And that was a partnership with the Rhode Island Department of, or the Environmental Management Department. And so they put on a free farmers market. So if you're a Cranston resident, you got free food from local farmers. It was incredible. There's a resource fair. So we went every week to talk about the library, to give out summer reading materials. And we just brought teen volunteers with us, and they ran lawn games. You can see them with the parachute. It's amazing. They love to play with the parachute in a way that I feel like no adult is quite as excited to play with parachute. So that's great. They did bubbles, they hand out materials, they talk about the library in a really like earnest and lovely, honest way. And like I said, they run activities, and just having them there totally changes the vibe of our outreach. It just feels much more like organic, and people are really excited to see young people out in the community talking about the library. And last but not least, we have done some programs in the past that sort of carry community service hours with them. So we have done Pizza and Politicians, where we had our city council president come and talk to a group about local government, what that job is like, how you become, a city councilor. We had pizza. We just started something called Tacos and Tradespeople. We have our first one in 2 weeks, where it's literally the same idea. We eat tacos and we talk to different tradespeople about their job. and you get community service hours for participating. In the past, I have done a teen advisory board, and that went really strong for a while and then fizzled. So I felt okay giving that one up. But that is something that we have done successfully in the past. Right now, we have a group that's sort of like in lieu of a teen advisory board, we have a group of teens that we are taking through a grant writing process, and we're teaching them how to apply for money from the city. And so the money is already earmarked, like we're going to get the money, but we want them to go through the process of planning a project and applying for the money. And so that's been really fun. And we've also done Bring Your Own Book Club. And that one, you might be like, why does that count for community service hours? And I usually bill it as like a focus group. They're helping with question development. They're helping me get an insight into their reading habits. And so I've done that at the library. Again, also something that kind of fizzled out, and I transitioned to that to one of our high schools. So once a month, I go with another librarian and we pass out swag, and we split into groups and we talk about books that we've been reading, but then we also talk about all types of media. And they get community service hours. And that's been really great, especially for those teens that can't get to a library, but want to have some input and interface with the library. So yeah, I love that one. I love going to East. All right, so that's my program kind of in a nutshell. Excuse me. I think the big thing for our library is we consider ourselves the Costco of teen volunteering. We have a ton of teens. We really are focused on volume. We just have a lot of teens that need hours for scouts, for church, for school. They need 20 hours to graduate, Junior National Honor Society, all these different reasons. So that's sort of our focus. There are definitely models, and we'll talk a little bit more when we get into the common problems, where that's just not going to work for you, but that's sort of the vibe that we're going for. So we don't guarantee hours. It's very much like you need to be on top of your email. You need to be on top of when I send those, monthly volunteer opportunities. You're on top of it, signing up for the things that you want to sign up for. And I'm keep track of everyone's hours, but I do not, like guarantee anyone a minimum amount. I don't, be like, okay, you said you needed 20 and you only have 5. Like that's 100% on them. We really are just providing the opportunities and allowing, teens to get their hours in. Okay, so common problems and some, suggestions on how to solve them when it comes to teen volunteering. So problem, I want teen volunteers, but I can't find enough of them. This is not the problem I have, but it is a problem that a lot of libraries have, especially if you're in a town that doesn't require community service hours for their graduation. I think that can sometimes be a huge determining factor in your teen volunteer pool. But a couple of things you can do. Really making sure you market your program, flyers, social media. I have a trifold brochure that I update every year, and I just pass them out places. I have them places in the library. I make sure every desk has them. So as soon as someone asks about it, you can hand them the brochure with all the information. It's something that I send to the schools. We've sent the document, and then we've also gotten them professionally printed and sent to the schools. Just to have something that like people don't necessarily need to know every detail about your program. They just need to know that there's a brochure that they can hand someone. We do a lot of outreach. The big ones are obviously National Honor Society, church, scouts, guidance counselors. We have an incredible partnership with our school librarians. And I do a lot of visits to the school every year. And that is especially true right now. I'm doing my 6th grade visits. So once they are in 6th grade, they're eligible to volunteer. And so I do a big push with the 6th grade middle schoolers, just to teach them about what the library has available to them now that they have leveled up into, teen land. If you don't have enough volunteers, that's when I think you can start guaranteeing hours, and you can give what I would consider a more boutique experience, kind of the, flip side of the Costco experience, where you actually can be a little bit more involved with each individual volunteer and, sort of craft a more specialized experience, which leads into an internship program. I've had lots of teens ask me about formal internship programs, and that is actually something that we have decided to opt out of. And I would love to have teen interns that come and like really dig deep and learn about what it's like to be a librarian, but we just don't have the bandwidth with the volume of volunteering that we do. So that is an option that is available to you if you don't have a huge influx of volunteers. Haha, so this is the problem that I had that I've been working on, which is I have more volunteers than I have tasks to assign them. And so my big thing is encouraging that prolonged involvement. So talking to them when they're in sixth grade, even if they don't necessarily start volunteering in sixth grade, having them be aware of it, telling them upfront and often when you see them at your visits that don't wait till you're a senior in high school if you have hours that you need to get done. And really just say, like, we're looking for teens that want to be here over a longer period of time. This is not the program if you need 20 hours in a month. Not guaranteeing hours, that's a big one for me. And that can be tough, like if there's people who have court-ordered community service. I am very upfront. I'm like, you are welcome to apply for a program. You're welcome to get on the email list. And I have had plenty of teens, especially for like traffic violations, get their hours in no problem, but it really is on them. I cannot guarantee any hours. Partnering with local organizations for projects. So like the senior center has been incredible. Being able to do those cards every year, I think really benefits both the teens and the community. And it is something super like concrete, not expensive, and they can get a lot of hours in by creating cards. And we've done, multiple sessions every fall for them to come in and make cards at the library. Designing programs that carry community service hours. So again, like those bring your own book clubs, those teen advisory boards, anything where they're going to be interfacing with local politicians, local, business people in your community, just sort of building those into your schedule. And then adding teens to any program possible. That was a big transition for us, was sort of thinking less like, okay, how many teens do I need to execute this thing properly? And thinking like, okay, how do I invite at least 3 to 4 teens into my program and give them a meaningful experience and get their hours in? And sort of just framing that slightly differently has allowed us to increase our volume a lot. And then another problem that I hear from people is that coordinating volunteers takes up too much of your time, and you're not really getting the results that you want, which I can that's like a very fair critique of teen volunteer programs, is that they are like, this takes up a ton of my time. So just some suggestions, automate everything you can, make it as easy as possible for yourself. Stay goal oriented, really question, if things are taking too much time, is it things that are worth it because they are building towards your ultimate goal, or are they things that you're like, this is actually getting me further away from my goal for my teen volunteer program? Remembering that it is both a service for the teens, but also something that should benefit you in the library. And that's, I think that's a balance that is tough to strike. And there's definitely been times where I've taken a step back and been like, oh man, this is like the payout was not worth this. Like the headache of, X, Y, and Z. But, just sort of keeping that balance in the back of your mind. Getting comfortable saying no and providing feedback. This is tough. It's tough, especially considering these are kids that, the public library is not school. They're also not getting paid, but they are providing a service and they are getting something out of it. They're getting volunteer hours, whether they need those for school or whether they are doing this, as a resume builder, they are getting something out of it. So I think it is just important to be able to say to kids like, hey, like, you're doing a great job, but you are on your phone a lot, or you're goofing off, or you should have gotten more done in the time that I've had you. And I do find that as long as you're kind but firm, I think they appreciate when you kind of level with them. And only do what you're capable of doing. So I say no to parents all the time. Like I said, with those internship programs, I've had parents that are very upset. They're like, little Jimmy's dream is to be a librarian and he wants to come volunteer with you as an intern 20 hours a week. And I'm like, I just can't. That's just not something that I'm capable of doing. And then finally, this is something that has really, I think taken root in my head lately is this idea that I consider my teen volunteer problem or teen volunteer program the work, right? It's not an extra. It's not something that I'm like, well, I wish I could do more teen volunteering stuff, but I have too many programs to run or too many books to purchase or like too much desk time. Like this is the work for me, and the other things are extra. Like this is the core of what I do, is providing teens in my community a place where they have a seat at the table. They feel like they are helping, they feel like they are connected to their community. And that is really the most important thing for me and for my library program. All right. So this is what I would consider best practices. These are, you can kind of take them or leave them, whatever speaks to you. But this is what I would consider if someone was like, what would you call best practices for your program? Number one, stay organized. I do keep records for every volunteer, which is different than like keeping track of like, oh, you need 20 hours and you only have 5. I just keep track of everyone's hours. It'd be great if they kept track of their own hours, but they don't. So I was just like, I'm going to keep track of them for you because I'm keeping track of my total numbers anyway. So this is just an example of my spreadsheet. I just have, a line for everyone, the month, however many hours they've done. There's a sign-in sheet at every desk when they come in, and I tell them if you don't sign in, you don't get your hours. So remember to sign in. And then that just makes it really easy to pull however many hours we have collectively done, because you can just auto sum it at the end. I do have a separate teen email, and that's huge because I do all of my scheduling over email. I've been looking into switching to something like an actual like scheduling software, but I haven't gotten there yet. But I do everything over my teen email. And that's just helpful to separate it out. And then also like my boss, the youth services coordinator for Cranston Public Library, has access to the email. So when I'm on vacation or, a kid freaks out because they're like, I need my paper signed. And it's like, Alyssa's out sick. There's someone else who has access to that email. And then again, automate everything you can, have that Google form, have that Google sheet. I even have like templates for like my welcome email. I can just copy and paste it and then just like change the dates or whatever it is I need to update. But really just having those things on hand so it's as easy as possible. You don't have to think about what you're going to write in a welcome email. You don't have to think about, oh my gosh, where did I write down my kids' like total hours? Everything is in a place. And then if you leave, you can very easily just share that with whoever it is that's going to be taking over for you. Next would be advocate. I never shut up about my teen volunteer program. I'm probably really annoying about it, which is why I was really excited to come talk to y'all about it because I talk to everyone about it. Like I said, core of what I do. And I think that the number of hours that your teens volunteer and the number of volunteers that you have are valuable metrics. So anytime, when they're like, what do you want to put in the annual report for teens? I'm like, I'm going to tell you about the hours that we've earned, the projects that we've done. I'm going to make sure our trustees know about our program. I'm going to make sure that every school knows about our program. Because I do think that is valuable data and a valuable snapshot of our community. So keep and share those stats with everyone. I'll even sometimes just share it like with our like at our we do like a biannual all staff meeting, and I will just be like, hey guys, just so you know, like this is where we're at with volunteering. Introduce your volunteers to patrons, admin, and the trustees. So whenever I have volunteers around, like if I see my assistant director, I'll be like, hey, come on over. Have you met these volunteers? I don't expect her to remember their names, but I think that's just like a really valuable put a face to the work that we're doing. I even had at the end of the summer, I had a group of teens come and present to the trustees, like what the teens accomplished over the summer. And that was really cool. I think it was fun for the trustees because it was like different than their normal meeting. And I think that the teens that I selected to present took it very seriously and really appreciated that opportunity. And then also like when we have them as program assistants, we introduce them to the kids, and if there's families or parents there, it's like, okay, these are the teen volunteers that we have today. And then providing opportunities for teens to share their experiences. So like we had them, volunteer or we had that group that presented to the trustees. We've also done, surveys at the end of different sessions about what do you want to see in the future for volunteering? What is your feedback? And then also just, checking in with them to make sure that they're sort of getting out of it what they want to get out of it. Next would be appreciate. So really just making sure your volunteers know how valuable they are. I try to create both formal and informal opportunities to show our appreciation. So we did an end of summer volunteer party. They got to create their own little gift bag. I wrote them each a thank you note. If someone really appreciated their help, I'll send them an email shout out like, hey, Miss Elena told me that you were an incredible, help the other day. We really appreciate you. I always tell them, like, if you're a great volunteer, like, if you need a letter of recommendation, I'm here for you. Just to really make them feel like we see you, we see the work that you're doing, and we really appreciate it. Get your staff on board and make it easy for them to accept volunteers. So that's why I do all the coordinating. So it really is like at the branches and even other people on my staff, they're like, I'm running a program and I need 3 volunteers. That's all they have to do. I reach out to the volunteers, I get them the volunteers, the volunteers I make sure that they know exactly what they need to do in order to get their hours, be successful. And then also not everyone is super comfortable with teens. I think we've all experienced that. So I really do try to appreciate and advocate for teens in the library through my program and really trying to get every staff member on board with like, this is the teen space too. The teens are an important and integral part of our library. And then also on the flip side, recognize and understand where teen volunteers can be challenging for the staff. We have, a no-show problem that happens all the time. No matter what, you're going to have teens that forget, that don't show up, that sign up, and then their parents are like, actually, you have soccer, and they just like totally forget to email you. Excuse me. Like that's challenging. That's challenging, when you expect people to show up and they don't. We also you have to accept some level of things not being executed the way that you would execute them. And that can be really challenging for people. I call it the 10% rule. It's just like when you give a teen a task, you have to expect that at least 10% of it is going to be unhinged. So, like, for example, I have them put together a bulletin board. 90% of it's going to be gorgeous. And then there's going to be like one tiny thing in the corner that someone drew like a weird guy. And you're just like, why? This is not a theme. Why did you put that weird dude in the corner of the bulletin board? But I'm like, that's just accepting the 10% where you're like, what were you thinking? Or the 10% of like the kid that like clearly just can't draw straight lines or didn't understand what you were saying. And that can be more challenging for some people than others. So just sort of recognizing where it is a big ask for certain people for certain tasks to invite teen volunteers into your spaces. Finally, stick to your goals. Like I said, get comfortable saying no. Your program can't be exactly what every single teen or every single parent wants or is looking for. And it sucks to say no. We want to say yes as much as possible. But, I gave that Costco example. We can't be a boutique experience. So we can't be, the perfect thing for everyone. Define what success looks like. So it could be like 50 volunteers a year. It could be that one meaningful internship for one teen. Both are super valuable. So I think think about what success looks like for you. And if you saw, some of you might have saw like my number of like 235 teens and been like, that's bananas. Don't be something here that like, oh, like, yeah, that sounds appropriate. You don't compare yourself to other people. You really just figure out what you feel is good for your community. And that's your goal. And just make sure you're writing down and communicating your goal with like your stakeholders, your boss, your admin, and just making sure that like I said, this is the work and making it a core piece of what you're doing and not an extra. And I think that we're very good at keeping circulation stats and program stats. And this is something that's a little bit in between. And so making sure that you are keeping your own stats, you are, gathering the data that you need to tell the story of, your teen volunteer program. All right, how am I doing on time? 12:05. Okay, cool. I want to make sure we have enough time for questions. So, equity, diversity, and inclusion. So this is something that I hope that we've all been thinking about pretty critically. Our library has been doing this with Daniel Margarita, the Building More Equitable Summers program. So this summer we really sat down and thought very hard about building an equitable summer program and what are the things that we're missing. And we invested in a thing called Policy Map, which is kind of pricey, but if you can afford it, it was amazing. And basically it allowed us to like map our library cards on our census tracts, compare demographics. And we found this one census tract in our city that doesn't have a library in it and that had a high percentage of young people and a low percentage of library cards. So we did a lot of targeted outreach in that area, including, 2 teams in that area. But you might not be able to afford something like Policy Map. So simple data gathering, ask on your teen volunteer application what schools they go to and see if there's a school that's missing. I did that and I realized that I had a really low percentage of kids from this one middle school. I upped my outreach to that middle school, really tried to get in with that school librarian. Because it's not a perfect one-to-one correlation, but like clearly there was like the community that feeds into that middle school was just not connecting with the library in the same way that other schools and communities were. So I definitely think there is ways to sort of gather data to see, what places you need to do more targeted outreach to and how you can invite more teens from different areas of your city and hopefully different backgrounds into your teen volunteer program. Through this process of trying to identify different places in our city that need more outreach. And then also from inviting more teens into our library program, into our teen volunteer program, we have seen this really incredible sort of byproduct of the teens in our city on a whole are a more diverse group than the older people in our city, and then also the people that work in the library. So at the end of the day, I am a white woman and I can't be anything other than a white woman. So I have been really heavily invested in creating a space where I can invite lots of different teens in and they become the face of the library. They're the ones that are checking the kids in. They're the ones that, if a parent is in the back of the room and it's like, hey, where's the bathroom? They're asking, the teen volunteer. And so I feel like our teen volunteers are just this incredible, diverse group that represent lots of different things that I am not. And so I can't be a mirror for a large percentage of our population, but I can support teens that then become the face of the library and they are our patrons. You know what I mean? Like they look like so-and-so's older sister, or they see someone that they're like, oh, you were my dance teacher. And I think it just creates an incredible organic diversification of the people in our library in a way that like I can't not be white. I don't have a ton of, power in terms of like hiring. I can't make more positions. I can't personally control who is going to library school, what their backgrounds are, but this is something I can control. And it has really just created a total shift. And we've actually been able to hire some teens that have come through our teen volunteer program as shelvers. And it's just really cool to see the younger part of our staff become more racially diverse, which is just one of those things that like it happens organically, and I just am very excited to see like where we go with that. All right, cool. I talked for a very long time. Thank you so much for listening to me blabber on about my favorite thing to talk about. I am going to stop sharing so that I can actually see all of your lovely faces, and I would love to answer some questions.
Alyssa, we've got a lot of questions for you, both in the question box as well as the chat. There's some great chat going on. Maybe we can start out with the question box. So going back to sort of how your summer went, of the 2,000 plus hours, how many do you think took place during just the summer?
Great question. So of the 2000 hours, probably like 1200. So over half. So over half of our hours take place in that 3-month period, and then the rest are throughout the school year.
And the next question has come up in the chat as well, but a question about having background checks done. So they're called different things in different states. I see a lot of our Massachusetts colleagues asking about being quarried. So essentially, do your teens need to go through a background check? It sounds like that's kind of maybe a barrier for a lot of folks.
So for us in our city, they do not. Once they turn 18, they do need to get background checked, which pretty much is not an issue because I have that hard cutoff when they become seniors. Or when they, graduate from high school, I mean. So they don't need to get background checked. It's going to be different for every city. I also feel like excuse me, you could make a case for they're part of the program, right? Like you're inviting them into the program. You're not going to background check the teens that would come to like a craft program. So if they're going to be teens that are then like in a room helping other kids with other adults in that space, I think there is, even if like there are like, oh, volunteers need to get background checked, I think there are ways that you could then like talk to your city about like, this is actually what we mean by volunteering. They're not working one-on-one alone with anyone. They are part of an established youth services program, if that makes sense.
No, that's a really good way to frame it. And this sort of leads into another question that has come up in both the chat and the question. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit is, do you have, because this could be something that could fit with a policy. So do you have a volunteer policy? One of our colleagues says that they don't really use volunteers because a lot of tasks they would assign falls into the category of work for paid staff. And there has been some conversation in here, sort of getting into the union, the non-union business of all of it. So I guess all of that to say, yeah, if you have a policy, what might it look like and what recommendations might you have for folks?
So we do have some written policies. It's mostly just like, I wouldn't call them policies because like that has to be like approved by the Board of Trustees. I was like best practices or like documents for like expectations for teens. I always do like for the summer, we do an orientation with an orientation packet that has expectations. But one of my big things is I do not allow the teens to do things that we have paid people for. So our teens do not shelve. Our teens do not check out books. Our teens don't do any of those things. Our teens are doing things like, again, supporting programs. They're not running the programs. They're supporting the programs. We don't have program assistants at the library. We have librarians that execute programming. We have paid shelvers. So that is something that I've had to say no to a lot. I have a lot of parents that are like, but I would like my child to get the full library experience. I want them to check books out. I want them to read to children. I want them to shelve books. And I'm like, no, those are things that people get paid for. So yeah, I think it is just a matter of like figuring out what are the things that you feel are professional or paraprofessional jobs that people are paid for. And what are things that you feel are truly like in a supportive role that other people don't have as like their specific job description.
Awesome, thank you. What does your application and onboarding process look like? And how do you manage transportation when taking teens to outreach programs?
So the application is that Google form. So remind me to pop that in the chat, the link to the presentation that has that. So that's our application. We do a similar one for the summer. So there's like a school year application or like a general application, and then we have our summer application. For summer, we do an in-person orientation. They get their packet. We go over expectations. Sometimes we'll do some team building activities. And then in terms of transportation, we don't, because we have 5 locations, and like I said, many of them are not walkable. They're in charge of their own transportation. So, because I consider like, hey, come do this thing for the library at the Bain track where the farmers market is probably the same ask for some kids as like, hey, do you want to volunteer at this other location that's not near your house? So they handle their own transportation. And again, it's totally voluntary. No one's ever forced to. So if a kid's like, oh, I can't get a ride there, it's like, that's fine. There's totally other opportunities for you to get involved. And I have had kids that, that's wherever the outreach is, it's like in the neighborhood they live in, or they can bike there. But yeah, I don't actually like load up teens in a van and bring them anywhere.
Right. And I'm sort of skipping around because there's so many questions here that just fit well so together. So I'm going to skip to in the chat, this sort of goes along with your application and onboarding process. You showed us your sign-in sheet. Is that being done on paper, or do you use a Google form for that?
So for signing in, so like you show up to volunteer, that is on paper. They just sign in saying like, hey, I'm here. And that is helpful because I can't be everywhere. And then I just like pull the sheet and, tally their hours. In terms of signing up for stuff, I send that out over email. I create just sort of like a spreadsheet, and they just email me back saying what hours they want, which can again turn into a free-for-all. But one thing that has been super helpful is this idea of like ramping up the number of volunteers we have at a program. So I very rarely ever just put one. I like to put like 4 if possible. Sometimes I have other librarians in my system that are like, I only need 2. And I'm like, are you sure about that? I need like 3 or 4. Because that accounts for no shows and also just gives more teens the opportunity to come help out. And like I said, sometimes like what they're doing is just checking people in and then standing in the back. That's fine. They're there. They're involved. They did a thing for you. And they're there if something happens and a kid needs to, be brought over and shown where the sink is or the bathroom or whatever it is. I do want to eventually get a better system. And that's something that I've been researching. There's been a huge ramp up in our team volunteering. Like we did twice as many hours as we did last year. So I think I'm at that critical tipping point. So.
And this is, we've got another question. So I love that idea of sort of like stacking your volunteers to, account. We all know no shows happen. We have a question from a colleague who has a volunteer program that is semi-automated like yours. A handful of kids and their parents are very fast to sign up for opportunities. I'm afraid if I turn them down to give others a chance, fate will have it that no one else signs up for the spot. So how do you give the quieter, less proactive teens a fair share of opportunities?
Yeah. So for me, kind of there's like two things I want to say. First is like, it sucks. You want to, especially parents are signing their kids up, like that's always a bummer. Because you do want to make it as fair as possible. I do feel like I'm very much first come, first serve. You have to check your email. You have to be at least a little bit proactive to get those hours. So I think like part of it is just making peace with and communicating those expectations to to teens. If there is a teen that's consistently like, oh, there's nothing left, you can be like, you gotta hop on it sooner, buddy. And then the other piece, and this is not as helpful if it is automated and they're actually signing up for themselves. I have definitely added like a 5th volunteer to something. Like if they're like, oh, all the things that they want are full, I'll be like, well, there's only 3 that have signed up for this thing. Maybe I'll just add a 4th spot in. And then having like that wide range of types of volunteering where like, something like card making, I do that like a service Saturday. So one Saturday a month, they come and they have a 2-hour block to work on a project. That's where we do a lot of the card making and a lot of those like prepping for community service projects, We even do stuff like, sharpen all the pencils and test the markers. And that's something I can accommodate a huge number. So having things like that, where if a teen's like, oh, I didn't sign up for anything, it's like, okay, well, we have like 2 things during the month that have a ton of spots, so we can add you into one of those. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Um, yeah, more these great questions are coming in. I'm going to tie together two questions. Um, One in the chat, one of our colleagues has teens who come to the library to volunteer because they have been bullied. Do you have a policy on reporting bullying if a teen confides in you? The two teens I have dealt with their bullying issues. And similarly, another question, do you ever have behavior issues with volunteers?
So I feel like I'm incredibly lucky. I don't have a ton of behavior issues with volunteers. Typically, it's like they're just young little dumb babies sometimes. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, it's like willfully like being like ratchet in the library. It's usually like the kid didn't realize that, like, yo, buddy, you're on your phone and your sound is on in the middle of a program that you're supposed to be like volunteering for. Or like, hey, you can't just like take out a Subway sandwich in the middle of, your craft prep, shift or whatever. So those are like the easy ones to correct, right? Like the things that it's just sort of like correcting behavior in the moment that's not malicious. It's just, teaching them how to sort of show up and, providing those structures of like, hey, we don't interrupt people. We listen to directions. We read the directions if we're given directions or something, blah, blah, blah. In terms of bullying, we don't have a separate policy. It's just part of our code of conduct. You need to be like nice to people. You can't harass people, can't put your hands on people. And I feel like I haven't had a ton of kids come to me with issues of bullying. Um, I think probably partially because we keep them pretty busy when they are at the library. We have a lot of kids that come and volunteer as like pairs, like they come with a friend. I feel like our kids in general are pretty nice. And the times that I have had someone come to me, it's been simple enough as being like, oh, that person's like making me uncomfortable. And it's like, okay, like let's just move you to another table. Like, um, I feel like my teens are like, I don't feel like I have to micromanage them. They're pretty good about managing themselves. And when they do come to me with issues, it tends to not be something that is like a prolonged thing. Because again, we have so many teens and so many locations. They're not with each other in the same way that they are in like a classroom. They just don't see each other as frequently, and there's just this huge rotation of kids, and so I don't think they get into like the nitty-gritty of being able to bully each other as much, if that makes sense.
That does. And I'm just going to clarify that question, that I think the question was more of like, right, sort of building that relationship with vulnerable teens. So if
Mm.
bullying is happening outside of the library,
Oh, okay.
is that something that, you would report to the school?
Gotcha. So I have had teens come to me and ask me things. I mean, we are if it was something that I felt like I needed to report, I would. But I do find that most of the time what they are talking to me about is mostly feelings. It's mostly just like feeling unhappy about something. I thankfully haven't had to deal with anything that I felt was like particularly dangerous. But at that point I would consult with my boss. We have that really great relationship with the schools, but I do think it is dicey because you want to have that balance of like you're a safe person for them to come talk to, and you don't want to blow up their spot and you don't want to make a big deal out of something that they were just sort of venting to you, but then you also want to make sure that everyone is safe. Like that's a huge thing, and I think coming from a school, I have that sort of dual perspective. Like I have been in a school where you are a mandatory reporter and you are, acting in loco paresis, and you are, the parent when the parent's not there. And then at the public library, it's a little bit different. You have a little bit more wiggle room to really sit back and be like, is this something that I need to report as a safety issue? Or is this something that I feel like I can be that safe space, and I can, um, provide, a sounding board without necessarily having to like alert um someone about that, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Some more questions about some of the specifics of your program. Do you reach out to the organizations like Help the Homeless and the Farmers Market, or do they reach out to the library?
So we're really fortunate in Cranston. We have just great partnerships. I do a lot of reaching out. Like, for example, for the senior center, we have an established relationship with the senior center. We have actually a small, tiny library branch in the senior center. And so I just was like, hey, I want my kids to make cards for you guys. This was like 3 years ago. I was like, I think that'd be cool if we make cards for you guys. And they were like, okay, how many cards do you think you could make? I was like, I don't know, how many cards do you need? And they were like, well, we give out 300 Thanksgiving meals and 300 Christmas. And I was like, done, let's do it. Let's make 600 cards. Why not? Um, so it is a little bit of reaching out to them. For the farmers market, that, the One Cranston Health Equity Zone, which is part of CCAP, we have an established relationship with them. And they were like, hey, do you want to come table? And I'm the one that was like, yes, I do want to come table. And I want to bring lawn games, and I want to bring team volunteers with me. So yeah, it's kind of a little bit of one, a little bit of the other.
And maybe this is a similar approach. How do you get the politicians to come in for the politicians and pizza program?
So again, I'm just very lucky. I'm so lucky. My library is amazing. We have an amazing team. Our director is very connected with our city. So when I was like, hey, I want to do pizza and politicians, who do you recommend? He was like, boom, boom, boom. This is who we're going to contact. And, he made that happen for me. Not everyone, Leanne, yes, Ed. Everyone knows Ed. So I'm very lucky. Not every place has that. But I think figuring out like, just reaching out, seeing if there's someone who knows someone. For tacos and trades people, we have like a library discussion board on, for like our Google emails. And I just was like, who knows like tradespeople? And I got like a ton of feedback. So like sometimes it's just you have to cold call people and be okay with getting a no or a nothing. And then sometimes it's just sort of like trying to leverage the people that are around you. And if like, maybe you have an in with someone at the school, maybe they have a good relationship with their superintendent, and their superintendent has a good relationship with the city council. It really just unfortunately can sometimes be who and sometimes you just have to like be patient and weasel your way in slowly over time.
Weaseling your way in slowly over time, because as you're talking, I was thinking about all of the groundwork that has been, laid for being able to do a program like this, about just the relationship building that has just taken place over time, that has, so I just want to remind folks that like you can't, like sometimes you try to just like start a program and jump into a program and then it might not work. But thinking to going back to those basics of building the relationships with your community and your teens, both at the same time. So thank you for reminding us about that. All right, let's see. We've got 2 minutes. So one more question. And there's been great conversation in the chat with folks giving like a lot of really good recommendations and tools to use. But there was a question in here about, let me find it, about communications. Oh, goodness. Someone had a good question.
While you do that, I'm just going to drop the link to the presentation in the chat so that everyone can have that. What's it about? Is it school emails can't receive outside?
No, just kidding. Oh yes, someone did that. That was the follow-up. That happens as well. That school emails can't receive outside specific networks. But the original question was, do you have a recommendation for encouraging teens to communicate more via email, or suggestions for an alternate communication route that doesn't involve sharing a personal number? Many of our teens just don't communicate with us, and no-shows, missing out emails are a huge problem.
Yeah, so part of it, unfortunately, is just making peace with that, part of the game. So our middle schoolers can't receive email, so they have to use either a parent email or a personal email, and that's something that's on our application, something I talk about at the schools a lot. The high school emails can receive emails, and that has to do with the COPPA restrictions. And I know this is not a satisfying answer, but part of being an adult is having to answer emails. And so I consider it a skill. I consider it okay, you need to be able to apply for something, fill out a form, show up when you need to show up. And that's not satisfying if you are trying to actively build your teen volunteers and you're not getting enough traction, because you want to make that as easy as possible for them. But I consider that emailing process, very shortly they're going to be in positions where they may have to email, probably will have to email for school or for their profession. I have had colleagues that have had a lot of success with Remind. I know that's something that people use. I also have one of the libraries in Rhode Island, they have an actual teen cell phone that they text the teens from. I also know that some people have set up Google numbers. So there's just there are definitely ways to build those supports in and to try to meet them where they are. But I also think that on the flip side, there are advantages to being nope, if you want to volunteer, you gotta, show up where you're gonna show up. You have to write this down in your planner, whatever. You have to put a reminder in your phone, and you need to answer the emails. If you sign up and I'm hey, I'm gonna email you, you actually have to check your email.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. So we are at just a little after 12:30. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for being here and for your thoughtful questions, and a lot of great resources in the chat that we'll save along with the recording. And Kim noted that we'll put Alyssa's slides in the tote bag as well. So now this is lunchtime, so please enjoy your lunch break, and we will see you back again at 1:30. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.